Cowboy saw a widow trade her baby's clothes for food. He left his coat folded on her chair. Dry Creek Station sat alone on a wide red plain under two pale suns. The land around it looked empty from far away, but it was not truly empty. Dust storms could rise without warning, cold nights could bite through thin walls, and the long roads between towns were quiet in a way that made people careful. The station was built from mixed parts. Some homes were made from old cargo panels, others were made from strong wood shipped from far colonies. The streets were narrow and uneven. Small lights floated on poles, powered by weak generators that needed fuel every week. People here did not dream big. They planned small. A good week meant clean water, working heaters, and enough food to make the children sleep without hunger. Elias Cade arrived near sunset. He rode a hover horse, a simple machine shaped like a horse with metal legs and a smooth engine sound. It was not fancy, but it was steady and strong. Elias preferred things that did their job and did not ask for attention. He was a cowboy in the old style, even on a far-off world. He wore boots with dust on them, gloves with worn seams, and a long coat that had seen too many storms. His hat was plain, but it shaded his eyes well. He carried a small bag, a water canteen, and a tool belt. People in the outer colonies knew his type. A wanderer. A fixer. A man who stayed long enough to help, then moved on. Elias slowed at the edge of town and looked over the market square. It was busy, but not loud. The people here saved their energy. Vendors spoke in calm voices. Buyers counted credits twice before spending. A thin line of delivery drones moved overhead, carrying small crates to storage rooms. The station guard stood near a gate, watching the crowd with tired eyes. Elias dismounted near a water post. He let the hover horse drink from a charging nozzle, then leaned against the post and watched. He always watched first. He believed the world spoke quietly, and only careful people heard it. The market smelled like cooked grain and engine oil. A food stall steamed in one corner. Another vendor sold hand tools, patched clothing, and cheap batteries. Elias saw miners from the canyon rigs with dusty faces. He saw mothers holding small children close. He saw travelers like himself passing through with quick eyes and light bags. Then he saw her. A woman stood near a food vendor's table. She was not asking for help in a loud way. She did not beg. She simply stood there with a small bundle in her hands, waiting for the vendor to look at her again. The bundle was folded neatly. Even from a distance, Elias could tell it was baby clothing. Tiny shirts, soft fabric, a small blanket with faded stitching. The woman's hair was tied back in a simple knot. Her coat was thin and old. Her boots looked one size too big, like she had bought them cheap because the right size cost more. But she held herself straight, not proud. Not stubborn, just steady, like someone who had learned to keep moving even when life kept pushing down. The vendor looked at the clothes and frowned. He checked the fabric like a man judging a broken tool. He rubbed the sleeve between his fingers, then glanced at his shelves. He did not look cruel, only careful. On Dry Creek, every item mattered. Every trade could decide whether a family ate today. The woman spoke softly. Elias could not hear her words, but he saw the small movement of her hands as she explained. The vendor sighed, then turned and grabbed a packet of nutrient bars and a container of dried grains. He placed them on the table. The woman's shoulders loosened slightly, like she had been holding her breath. She reached for the food. For a moment, her hands shook. She steadied them, then took the items and pressed them against her chest. Elias felt something tighten inside him. It wasn't anger exactly. It was the sharp sting of understanding. He had seen hard trades before. People sold watches, rings, tools, even family photos. But baby clothes were different. Baby clothes were not just fabric. They were small promises that had once felt real. The woman turned away quickly. She didn't look around. She didn't want anyone to see. Elias watched her walk out of the market square. She moved toward the outer ring of homes, where the walls were thinner and the lights weaker. He waited a few seconds, then walked to the vendor's stall. "How much for those clothes?" Elias asked. The vendor looked up surprised. "You want them?" Elias kept his voice calm. "How much?" The vendor hesitated. "Not many folks buy baby things here," he said. Hard place for it. It was not cheap. Elias paid without bargaining. The vendor handed him the bundle. Elias took it carefully, like it could break. He folded it tighter and placed it into his saddle pack. The vendor watched him with confusion, but did not ask questions. People on Dry Creek had learned not to ask too many. Night settled in. The two suns dropped below the horizon, leaving a thin blue edge of light on the plain. Cold air poured into the streets. Lantern drones rose higher, casting pale circles across the walkways. Doors closed. Market stalls shut down one by one. The station became quieter, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that waited for trouble. Elias walked through the residential paths with slow steps. He did not rush. He was not hunting. He was only following the direction the woman had gone. He kept a respectful distance, checking reflections in windows, using shadows to stay unseen. He found her small living unit near the edge of town. It was a narrow room built from metal panels, with a single window and a door that didn't close fully. Warm light glowed from inside. Elias stopped in the darker part of the corridor and looked through the window. The woman sat at a simple table. She had taken off her thin coat and hung it on a hook. The food sat in front of her. She was dividing it into small portions with careful hands, like she was planning for several days. She moved slowly, as if rushing would waste something. Across from her, an empty chair sat pushed slightly back. The chair looked used, but clean. Elias's eyes moved to the corner of the room. A small shelf held a tiny cup and a small toy shaped like a star. There were no other signs of a child, but those small items spoke louder than any words. The woman paused and stared at the food for a long moment. Her face did not twist in sadness. She simply looked tired. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin piece of fabric, maybe a ribbon or a small strap. She held it in her fingers for a second, then set it down beside her plate like it was important. Elias didn't need to know more. The picture was clear enough. He stepped back from the window and looked down at his own coat. It was thick and lined, made for cold roads and storms. It had protected him for years. It also had value. People on Dry Creek would trade a lot for it. Elias could sell it and buy supplies for weeks. But when he thought of the woman trading baby clothes for food, the choice felt simple. The cold hit him quickly, but he ignored it. He folded the coat neatly, smoothing the fabric with his hands. He pulled the baby clothes bundle from his pack and checked it once more to make sure it was complete. Then he walked to the door.
It was slightly open. He did not knock.
He did not call out. He didn't want to turn his kindness into a moment she had to carry like a debt. He stepped inside just enough to reach the empty chair. He placed his folded coat on the chair, careful and quiet. Then he set the baby clothes on top of the coat, like a gentle weight. He also slid a small packet of credits under the edge of the bundle, just enough to help, not enough to draw attention. He turned to leave. Behind him, the woman shifted in her seat, as if she had heard the smallest sound. Elias froze for a heartbeat, then moved again, stepping out as silently as he had come in. He walked back into the cold street without looking back. The wind rose as he headed toward the station's outer gate. Dust swirled around his boots. His breath showed in the air. He felt the cold on his arms now, but he did not regret the choice. Elias reached his hover horse and checked the straps on his pack. He planned to leave before sunrise, like always. Dry Creek was not his home. He had no home. He had roads and the habit of moving forward. Yet, as he stood there in the dark, he felt something different. Not peace, not certainty. Just a quiet pull, like the world was asking him to stay one more day. He looked back once toward the line of small homes. The lights were dim. The wind carried faint sounds of doors shutting and distant machines humming. Somewhere in that row, a widow sat at a table with food in front of her and a folded coat on an empty chair. Elias placed a hand on the hover horse's neck and whispered to it like it was a real animal. Then he waited, listening to the night, unsure if he was still the kind of man who could ride away without looking back. Morning came slowly to Dry Creek Station. The sky turned from deep blue to pale silver as the twin suns rose over the wide red plains. Cold air moved through the narrow streets, carrying dust and the faint smell of metal. Most people woke early here because the day's heat could become strong quickly, and work needed to begin before the sun climbed too high. Elias Cade stood near the outer gate, holding a tin cup of warm synth coffee. Without his coat, he felt the cold deeply, but he ignored it. He had slept lightly near his hover horse, using only a thin blanket from his pack. He told himself he would leave soon. That had always been his way. Stay long enough to help, then move on before roots could grow. But something felt unfinished. He watched workers open shop doors. A maintenance drone floated by, scanning damaged wall panels from last season's storms. A group of children ran past him laughing, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Life on Dry Creek continued without pause, as it always did. Elias finished his drink and walked toward the market square one last time. He wanted supplies for the road and maybe a hot meal before leaving. The square was quieter than yesterday, but slowly filling with activity. Vendors arranged goods, calling softly to early customers. As Elias moved through the crowd, he heard a familiar voice. "Has anyone seen him?" He turned slightly. The widow stood near the food stall, holding his coat folded carefully in her arms. The bundle of baby clothes rested on top of it. Her eyes searched the crowd with quiet urgency. She did not look angry or confused, only determined. The vendor who had sold the clothes yesterday shrugged. "Cowboy type," he said. "Tall, quiet. Bought the clothes after you left." She nodded slowly, her fingers gripping the coat tighter. "I need to thank him." Elias watched from behind a stack of crates. He considered leaving without speaking. It would be easier. Gratitude often created ties, and ties made leaving harder. But she turned slightly, and her eyes met his. For a moment, neither of them moved. She walked toward him slowly, her steps careful, as if unsure she was right. "Was it you?" she asked gently. Elias hesitated, then nodded once. She studied his face. He looked colder without his coat, his shoulders tense against the morning wind. She held the coat out toward him. "You should take this back," she said softly. "You need it." "You keep it." She looked down at the coat, then back at him. "You don't know me." He thought for a moment before answering. "Sometimes that makes it easier." She smiled faintly at that. "My name is Mara." They stood quietly for a moment, watching the movement around them. "I wasn't sure what to do when I found this," she said. "No one has done something like that for me before. I thought maybe it was a mistake." "It wasn't," he said. She nodded slowly. "I used the credits you left to buy fresh water and a heater filter. Thank you." After a pause, she spoke again. "My husband worked the mining rigs outside the canyon," she said. "He used to say this station was strong because people watched out for each other. After he didn't come back, I started to think he was wrong." Elias listened quietly. "The storms took him," she continued, "and my child didn't survive the winter sickness." She did not cry when she said it. Her voice stayed calm, like she had spoken the words many times to herself already. "I'm sorry," Elias said. She gave a small shrug. "Life keeps moving. You either move with it or get left behind." Before Elias could respond, a loud alarm cut through the air. A sharp siren echoed across the station, rising and falling in warning. People froze for a second, then began to move quickly. Guards shouted orders. Market vendors pulled in their goods. Children were gathered and guided towards safer buildings. Elias looked toward the sky. Dark shapes appeared on the horizon, moving fast. "Raiders?" someone shouted. Mara's face tightened, but she did not panic. She held the coat close, then turned to Elias. "What do we do?" "Stay near shelter," he said calmly. "Help people who need it." The sky grew darker as several ships descended. They were small but fast, painted in dull colors to blend with the desert. Dust swirled as they lowered closer to the ground beyond the outer wall. Defensive turrets powered up, rotating slowly toward the threat. The station guards took positions behind metal barricades. Elias moved toward a guard and accepted a spare pulse rifle without hesitation. He checked the weapon quickly, then took position near the entrance road. The first explosion shook the ground. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see. People ran toward safe zones while drones guided them with flashing lights. Mara stayed close to a group of children, leading them toward a storage building. Elias watched her for a moment before focusing on the approaching figures outside the gate. Raiders advanced quickly, aiming for supply storage. Food and water were more valuable than gold in places like Dry Creek. Elias fired only when necessary, his movements calm and controlled. He didn't waste energy or shots. Years of wandering had taught him how to stay steady when chaos rose around him. A small group of raiders broke through a side path, heading toward the residential area. Elias moved to intercept, stepping into their path long enough for others to escape. He fired carefully, forcing them to retreat without chasing them farther than needed. The fight felt longer than it was. After several tense minutes, the raider ships lifted off again, leaving behind damaged walls and scattered debris. The sirens faded, replaced by the sound of people calling to one another, checking for injuries, counting survivors. Elias lowered the rifle and took a slow breath. Mara approached him once the danger passed. Dust covered her boots, but her eyes were clear. "You stayed," she said. "I did," he replied. "You were going to leave this morning, weren't you?" He nodded. She smiled slightly. "Maybe Dry Creek isn't done with you yet." Elias looked around at the people repairing damage together, sharing tools, helping one another without being asked. Something inside him shifted, not loudly, but enough to be felt. "Maybe not," he said quietly. The twin suns climbed higher into the sky, warming the cold air. Around them, the station began to rebuild again, stronger than before. and for the first time since arriving, Elias did not think about the road ahead. He only thought about the moment he stood in and the strange feeling that staying might not be the same as being trapped. The dust had not fully settled after the raider attack. Fine red particles floated through the air, shining softly in the light of the twin suns. Dry Creek Station moved slowly, like a person waking after a long night. Some walls were damaged, several market stalls had broken frames, and the main gate showed deep marks where heavy tools had struck it, but the people of the station did not sit still. They repaired, lifted, cleaned, and supported each other without needing to be told. Elias's Cade stood near a row of supply crates, helping a young mechanic lift a bent metal panel back into place. Without his coat, the morning wind still felt sharp, but work kept him warm. He had not planned to stay this long. Yet every time he thought about leaving, something else needed doing. The mechanic wiped sweat from his forehead and gave Elias a thankful nod. "You handle tools like you grew up here." Elias gave a small smile. "Grew up in places like this." "Places like this exist everywhere." Elias did not answer. He simply picked up another piece of metal and carried it toward the repair line. Across the square, Mara organized a small group of people distributing water and food. She moved with quiet confidence, her voice calm as she spoke to others. The coat Elias had given her now rested over her shoulders, slightly too large but warm and protective. Every so often she looked toward Elias, not to watch him closely, but with a quiet understanding that he was part of the station now. As midday approached, a meeting was called near the central tower. The station's lead guard, an older man named Brant, addressed the gathered crowd. "The raiders tested our defenses," Brant said. "They will come again if they think we are weak. We need stronger watch rotations and better barriers." People nodded. No one complained. Survival required preparation. Brant's eyes moved across the crowd until they landed on Elias. "You fought well yesterday," he said. "We could use someone like you on watch." Elias shifted slightly. He was not used to being asked to stay. Usually people thanked him and expected him to leave soon after. "I'll help while I'm here," he replied. Brant gave a satisfied nod. The rest of the day passed with steady work. Elias repaired damaged drones, helped reinforce walls, and guided younger guards in setting up new defensive lines. He did not give long speeches or act like a leader, but others watched him and learned from his quiet actions. In the late afternoon, Mara approached him carrying 2 cups of warm broth.
"I forgot to eat," she said, handing him in one.
He accepted it with a grateful nod. They sat on a low crate together, watching the station slowly return to normal. "You move like someone who has seen many fights," she said gently. Elias looked toward the horizon. Enough. She did not ask for details. Instead, she spoke about her own past. "My husband used to say the frontier changes people. Some become harder. Some become kinder. I used to think those were opposite things." "And now?" Elias asked. "I think they can be the same," she said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Later that evening, a scout drone returned with new information. Raiders had not gone far. They had landed several kilometers away, likely preparing for another attempt. The station's mood shifted from relief to cautious readiness. Brant gathered a small group, including Elias. "We need eyes outside the walls," he said. "If they attack again, we need warning." As night fell, he rode his hover horse out beyond the station with 2 other riders. The desert looked endless under the twin moons. The air felt colder away from the shelter of buildings, and the silence of the open plain pressed against them. They reached a ridge overlooking a wide canyon. From there, they could see faint lights in the distance, the raider camp. Elias studied the scene carefully. The raiders were not many, but they were organized. They had set up temporary shelters and small defense turrets. It was clear they planned to return. One of the riders whispered, "Should we attack them now?"
No, we watch, we learn. They stayed hidden, observing patterns and movements.
Elias noticed supply crates near the ships. He noticed weak points in their setup. Years of experience helped him see details others might miss. After several hours, they returned to Dry Creek and reported what they had seen. The station prepared quietly. Barriers were strengthened, extra supplies moved underground, and escape routes planned just in case. Mara found Elias near the edge of town when he returned. "You look tired," she said. "Just thinking," he replied. She handed him a small package. Inside was a scarf made from soft fabric, simple but warm. "I repaired this from old materials," she said. It's not as good as your coat, but it helps. Elias wrapped it around his neck and felt the warmth immediately. Thank you. He looked at the stars above, remembering the many roads he had traveled. For years, he had avoided staying too long anywhere. Staying meant attachment. Attachment meant loss. But Dry Creek felt different. People here did not expect perfection. They did not ask for promises he could not keep. They simply accepted help and offered kindness in return. The next morning brought tension. Scout alarms signaled movement near the horizon. Raider ships lifted from their camp, heading toward the station once again. Elias took position near the main gate. Guards stood ready beside him. Mara helped guide civilians towards safe areas, her movements calm despite the danger. As the ships approached, Elias felt steady rather than restless. This time he was not just passing through. He was defending something he had helped build, even if only for a short time. Defensive turrets fired warning shots. Raiders tried to flank the walls, but new barriers slowed them. Elias moved along the defense line, helping where needed, encouraging younger guards with simple words. At one moment, a section of the wall shook under heavy impact. Elias rushed to reinforce it with others, holding the line until backup arrived. His actions were quiet but important, and people followed his example without hesitation. Eventually, the raiders retreated again, their ships rising into the sky and disappearing beyond the desert horizon. Cheers broke out across the station. Not loud celebrations, but deep relief shared by everyone. Mara approached Elias once more. "You helped save this place," she said. "We all did," he replied. She smiled gently. "You keep saying that, but you don't see what others see." "A man who stopped running," she said softly. Elias looked away, unsure how to respond. As the sun set again over Dry Creek Station, he stood beside the repaired walls, watching people rebuild with renewed strength. The road still waited beyond the horizon, but for the first time in many years it did not call to him as loudly as before. The days after the second attack felt different at Dry Creek Station. The people moved with more confidence now. Repairs continued, but there was less fear in their eyes. The wall stood stronger. The guards worked in better teams. Even the children laughed louder, as if they understood that the danger had passed for now. Elias Cade woke early, as he always did. The sky was still dark blue, and only one sun had begun to rise. He sat near the outer gate, drinking warm tea from a metal cup. The scarf Mara had given him rested around his neck, protecting him from the cold wind. He noticed how strange it felt to sit still without planning his next journey. For years, every morning began with movement. Pack up. Ride out. Leave before anyone asked him to stay. But here, no one pushed him away. And no one held him tightly either. The station allowed him to breathe. He stood and walked through the quiet streets. Vendors prepared their stalls again. Broken signs had been repaired. Someone had painted a new symbol near the main gate, showing a rising sun above the desert. It felt like a promise of survival. Mara's small food stall had grown since the attack. A simple table had turned into a stronger counter made from salvaged wood and metal. A small heater warmed the space, and steam rose from pots filled with soup and cooked grains. She worked carefully, greeting each customer with calm kindness. When she saw Elias, her face brightened slightly. "You are awake early again," she said. "Habit," he replied. She handed him a bowl without asking for payment. "You helped repair my stall." "This is fair." Elias accepted it, sitting nearby while watching people come and go. A group of miners stopped to eat before heading to the canyon. A mother thanked Mara quietly for extra portions she had received the previous day. Elias noticed how Mara listened to each person fully, giving attention without rushing. "You look like you are thinking about something heavy," she said after a while. He nodded slowly. "I usually leave after things settle down." She stirred a pot gently. "And now, I'm not sure," he admitted. She smiled softly but did not push him for an answer. Later that day, Brent called another meeting. Scouts reported that the raiders had moved far away. The threat seemed gone, at least for the near future. The station planned to expand its defenses and maybe grow beyond survival into something stronger. "We need people willing to stay and help build," Brant said. "Not just repair. Build." His eyes moved toward Elias again, but this time he did not speak directly to him. After the meeting, Elias walked alone along the edge of the station. The desert stretched wide and silent beyond the walls. His hover horse stood ready, fully charged, as if waiting for him to make a decision. The machine had carried him across many worlds and many lonely roads. He remembered other towns, other people he had helped, faces that faded as he rode away. He had always believed that leaving kept him safe from loss. If he never stayed long, He never had to feel the pain of goodbye. But as he looked back toward Dry Creek Station, he saw more than buildings. He saw people working together, children running through the streets, Mara's stall sending warm smells into the air. He felt something settle inside him. Not a loud feeling, but steady and warm. That evening, a small celebration took place near the market square. Not a big festival, just shared food and quiet music played on old instruments. People sat together, telling stories of the attack and laughing at moments that had seemed frightening before. Mara sat beside Elias near a lantern. "You look uncomfortable," she teased gently. "I'm not used to celebrations," he admitted. She laughed softly. "Then you should practice." A young boy approached Elias and handed him a small carved token shaped like a star. "For helping us," the boy said before running away again. Elias turned the token in his hands. It was simple but carefully made. He felt a strange tightness in his chest. "You see?" Mara said. "You matter here." He looked at her, unsure what to say. As the night grew quieter, Elias walked back toward the outer gate once more. He stood beside his hover horse, touching its metal neck gently. He could leave now. No one would stop him. The road was open, and the stars above promised endless travel. He closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the empty chair where he had left his coat. He thought about the way Mara had stood strong even in loss. He thought about the people who had trusted him without asking questions. When he opened his eyes again, the decision felt clear. He turned away from the hover horse and walked back toward the station. The next morning he found Brant near the watchtower. "You said you needed people to build," Elias said simply. Brant nodded slowly, understanding without needing more words. "Welcome to Dry Creek." Days passed, then weeks. Elias helped train new guards and repair old equipment. He built stronger barriers along the walls and showed younger workers how to fix drones with simple tools. People stopped seeing him as a traveler and began seeing him as one of their own. Mara's stall became a regular meeting place. Elias often sat there after long workdays, sharing quiet conversations. They did not rush their friendship or define it with big words. It grew slowly, like plants in the desert that learned to survive with little water but strong roots. One evening, as the twin suns set in orange and gold, Elias stood beside Mara watching the horizon. "You stayed," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head, "No." She smiled, and the wind moved gently through the streets, carrying the sound of distant laughter. Dry Creek Station no longer felt like a temporary stop. It felt like a beginning, a place where a wandering cowboy could finally rest without losing himself. And as night fell over the desert, Elias understood that sometimes the strongest journey was not riding away, but choosing to stay where kindness had found him.